I'll just, okay. So you'll be here, and I want you to then, the most important of these 4 tabs is careers, but I want you to read through all 4 of them. Once you click on your personality type, it'll open up another page under careers, under this tab here, okay? That's going to provide you a bunch of options. In fact, this page scrolls, but again, it's just a screen grab, so you don't see the whole thing. And I want you to look through all of the different careers that a lot of analysis and research have shown people with your personality type, whenever you see your list, typically are really successful in those particular careers. So I thought it was really interesting because, you know, I've been in marketing my whole life, and I've done market research, and I've done advertising management. And look, it's right here among the top, 3, right? Management consultant. That was what my whole company was for 9 years. I started a company and it did pretty well till the recession came. I've done market research. I've, worked in advertising management. I've never done advertising sales, but it says that I would be good at it, and I can see that I probably would be. Web developer, that's another career path that I could choose, and I build websites. So I find that the things that it was recommending for me are actually right on the money. And I had never seen this page before. It's just kind of what I gravitated towards in my own life, okay? So the next bit is you've already had time to think about, in the first 2 assignments, your life goals, that was assignment 1, and your personal values, and that was assignment 2. So before, this is key, before you start reading through all the different careers, I want you to go back and look at what you wrote previously in assignments 1 and 2, okay? So that you're clear in your mind about what you were thinking about when you wrote those other assignments. And after you've done that, I want you to carefully go through each of those careers that once you've identified your personality, it says that these are potentially great for you, okay? And then go back to the 16 personalities site. So you're kind of going back and forth. You start with 16 personalities, then you go to Truity, then I'm sending you back to 16 personalities again, and review the explore your type information. So this is what my page looks like. My ENTP, they call it a debater. And you can see that there's a tab here called strengths and weaknesses. There's one called romantic relationships, one called friendships, one called parenthood, one called career paths. Again, the most important for us on the project is career paths, but I really want you to think about all of these things, because if you think about your life goals, certainly you guys probably have thought in the future that maybe you want to be parents, for instance, and that maybe you want to get married. So these things, all definitely are going to have a lot to do with you and your life and your future, okay? As you read, take notes, just like you've done on the other assignments, about what each section has to generally say about people with your personality type. So I'm showing you the page that goes along with mine. So all of this that you've done so far, if we think back to that 3x3 writing matrix and the 3 basic phases of writing anything for business, we talked about there's a pre-writing phase, there's the writing, and then there's the proofing, editing, and revising, which is, the 3rd stage. So far, and all the work that you've done, up until here, you've been working through the pre-writing phase. Now I want you to write an essay that addresses 4 points. There's 1 about you, 2 about potential career paths, 3 about looking forward, and then 4, a summary, like an ending paragraph that wraps it all up, okay? And I want you to answer these questions, right? Do you agree with what the 16 personalities assessment had to say about you as regards your personality? Because you're going to go through, those tabs that we looked at. Let me go back to those for a second. You're going to learn all about your personality, and you're going to look at, the career paths and everything. It'll look at your strengths and weaknesses. It'll look at romantic relationships. It'll look at friendships. It'll look at all these things and talk about you within each of those settings. And so, do you agree with what it had to say about you? Which things did you agree with? And in what ways do you think maybe you are more unique than the, quote, average person that might fall into one of these personality types? Okay, so these are the categories: romantic relationships, friendships, parenthood, career paths, and workplace habits. So, do you agree with what it says, or don't you? And in what ways do you think you're different, or you're unique? Okay, so that's one. And then number two is, let's think about these potential career paths. So that Truity website that I showed you listed a number of careers that people that have your general 4-letter code typically succeed in. So which of those career options, after you've looked at them all and thought about you and everything, which of those are most interesting to you? Were there any surprises among the options, things that you never ever thought about before? Which of these seemed most interesting from the perspectives of your life goals, going back to assignment 1, and your personal values, going back to assignment 2? Which of these feel like the closest fit to what you've already said are important to you? So what I'm saying is, this assignment, this third assignment, is giving you a whole new set of things to think about. But these things should, if you think deeply about it, maybe change the way you think about your goals or your values. It could, it possibly could. Okay, so which of these now, of these careers seem like the closest fit to what you've already said are important to you? And it's okay to rethink the things that you said previously. I mean, it's all about living and growing and being humans. So you might now say, I said something in assignment 1 that I want to rethink that. Maybe now I've learned more about myself, and I don't know if that's really true anymore now that I've thought about these other things. Same thing with your values. And are there any adjustments that you'd like to make, either things you'd like to add or things that you'd like to remove from your list of goals or your values? Okay, so you're thinking about careers and which of these are interesting and which of these are surprising, and then we get to number 3, looking forward. So looking forward is, now it's time to choose a minimum of that big long list that you've been given. Time to choose a minimum of 3 potential career options from the list that Truity website gave you. Which ones are you going to select? And I want you to think hard about your selections. I want you to come up with a list of reasons why you're choosing those. Not just, oh, that sounds good, I guess I'll do this or that or the other one. Really try to have good reasons, because what I'm trying to do with this, with you, is help you, move towards career decisions. Maybe rethinking where you thought you were going to head in life, or maybe it could also confirm that, yeah, you've chosen the right path. But this is a time for you to really seriously say, I've been given this 3 or 4 month window of time in Joe's class, and now that I've been learning some certain things, do I still feel like this is the right path for me? So I want you to have good reasons why you've chosen those 3, okay? And explain those reasons in this third section. And then finally, summing it up, write a summary paragraph that ties the first 3 things all together, and write a conclusion. So it's an essay in 4 parts. Does that all sound clear, or do you want me to go back over things again?
I think it's clear.
Okay, well, you guys will have 2 weeks to do it. So please, if you find like you're not certain about what to do on anything, please call me, text me, and let me know, and we'll set some time aside, because I really think this could be really important for you in your, moving forward, with and I hope it could be. So I really want you to take this seriously. And if you come up with questions and you're not sure where to go, please reach out and we'll talk about it together. So this will be due on November 8th at basically midnight, and upload the assignment to the Dropbox folder that you've used before. And this is a hyperlink that takes you there. Okay. So that's the assignment. What do you guys think?
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. I think it could be really exciting. Again, but just to say it again, I've said it before. When I came up with this project, it was out of hopes that I could have helped me students avoid the frustrations that I had in my life because I took a few wrong turns down the road. If you can avoid those early by thinking deep about it up front, you're going to have a much better start to your careers in the first half of your life, That's my hope for you anyway. Okay, questions about it, or should I just move on with the lecture for tonight? I guess I'll move on. Stop me at any time if you guys want to come back and talk about this. And then let me open up the PowerPoint. I'm going to stop sharing while I dig it up. Hang on, guys. Okay. So we're talking tonight about proposals, writing proposals. And this is something that very likely in your careers, you'll have something to do with these at one point or another, okay? Lots of career paths get involved in doing this. If you're in accounting or if you're in finance, you might have times where your company is asking you to get involved in developing one of these. If you're in sales or marketing, highly likely that you'll be doing this. So let's start first, I think, by coming up with a definition for what a proposal is. I just want to confirm, can you all see the slide?
No, I can't.
No, okay, that's right. I never did go back to share the screen again. Okay. How about now?
Yes, I can see it.
Good, I'm glad that I made sure. Okay, so the definition for a proposal is a written offer to solve problems, provide services, or sell products. This is we're talking about an environment where one business is making a proposal to another business, or a company is making a proposal to like a family or a household. An example of the household side would be you've got an architect that you're going to contract, that you're talking with because your family wants to build a custom home. Or you're talking to a guy that does landscaping and you want to have your yard re-landscaped. Or you're talking to somebody that builds backyard pools and spas, right? So you're talking about a large project that's going to cost, minimally, thousands of dollars. And in the business to business world, it could cost millions. Okay. So these proposals from the side of the company that's making the pitch are of huge value, because that means that there's a lot of money tied into it. So these documents have to be put together really well. Okay. But because of that, we have to really understand how they work and the parts to it. So there's different kinds of proposals too. One is called an informal proposal. Okay. Sorry about that. One is called an informal proposal. And the structure of an informal proposal includes an introduction, the background about why this proposal is being written, and maybe previous conversations that the company may have had with the customer company or the family who's looking at having some contracted work done. The proposal itself is, we're going to do XYZ project. This is the calendar plan for the project. It's going to go on for quite a while. These are the people that will be involved in the project. This is what the project is ultimately going to cost. And then you have a conclusion around it. So in these proposals, like this informal one, is usually short, and it can be formatted as a memo or a letter. Again, think about, it's informal. There's lots of pieces to it, but it's not so detailed that it's going to be like a big report. It could probably be handled in a couple of pages. Okay. Now, formal proposals are more complicated, and they might range from anywhere between 5 to 200 pages. Yeah. What's included in it? Well, the very first line that you see is something that says copy of an RFP. RFP means request for proposal. So what's happened is the customer, either the family or the other business, has contacted another company to say, we would like some work done. We would like for you to give us a quote. So that's that request for proposal. It's also called an RFQ, request for quote. Sometimes it's in the formal proposal, and as you can see here, written optional, sometimes it's not. There's a letter of transmittal, which is like a cover letter that goes with the formal proposal. And then there's a summary about what's in the proposal. That's the abstract or the summary. Now, the next big piece is the title page. It'll, it's just a cover. It'll have the name of the selling company. It'll have the name of the customer on it. It'll have a date. There's a table of contents, because this might be a pretty deep project with lots of moving parts, so that it might be a pretty long report. So there'll be a table of contents so people can find things easily. And if there's going to be a lot of charts and things that are being referred to throughout the document, you'll list all of those things. They call it a list of figures. You'll list all of those also in the table of contents. Then there's an introduction of body, right? Now this introduction includes a few things. First you're going to hint at extraordinary results, meaning you're trying to sell the customer, so you're promising to deliver something that's really going to be wonderful. The customer's going to be super happy with it. You've got an approach that's far better than any of your competitors. You're trying to get their confidence, right? You promise low costs or speedy results. And if it's not low cost, then you're also going to talk to the idea of high value. High value can mean this is not cheap, but we're packing a lot into this proposal. So you're going to really feel like you got a great value. Okay. And then there's also a mention about maybe some sort of a remarkable resource. This remarkable resource could be, you've got unique bench strength, meaning you've got a unique management group that it far outshines other management groups, or you've got a special process involved that other companies don't do, or you've got special super expensive equipment that other companies don't use, or something that's really unique and special about the way that you're going to approach that customer's project. Okay, so these are all really, really important stuff. And this is all going into the introduction, right? You might identify a serious problem, something that, the potential customer needs to keep in their back of their mind. What you're doing in this case is you're trying to plant doubt about other providers so that they're only going to feel comfortable giving you the business. I mean, this is all sales and marketing here, right? So you're saying, look, if this isn't done right, there is a potential that X, Y, and Z horrible thing could happen. Like if we're going to build a home for you, if the foundation isn't built particularly along the way that we're proposing, the entire house could collapse. I mean, that's probably overblown, but I think you understand the point, right? You're planting a seed of doubt in the mind of the other party. And then you're going to specify a key issue or a benefit that's at the heart of the proposal. Meaning, because we've got, your family's safety foremost in our minds, we've taken care to, add certain things that other companies may not include in their proposal. But that's only because we are so good and conscientious at the way that we build custom homes. Okay, that's sort of the way that would sound. Now we get to the background or the problem or purpose. And in this section of background, problem, and purpose, we're identifying the problem and we're discussing the goals of the project. So identifying the problem it's not like a problem like, we don't have enough money to support this project or our team isn't big enough. That's not the kind of problem I mean. When I say identify the problem, what I'm saying is you're identifying the nature of the project itself. You're being very, very specific about what it is you intend to do. And then you're going to repeat the language that came from the customer's request for proposal when they requested quotes. You're going to say, okay, in your request, you mentioned that point 1, 2, and 3 were all important to you that we include in our proposal. So we want you to know that we've included steps 1, 2, and 3 from your original request. Okay, so those are the things that go into the background. When we talk about staffing, one is you're going to describe the credentials or the expertise of the people who are the leaders in the project. It's meant to give the potential customer a sense of security that, boy, this company that's giving us this quote right now has got amazing resources in terms of capability and management and history and expertise. And wow, we would be stupid not to work with these guys. We need their expertise on this project. That's why you do that, okay? And then you also want to remember that this budget, that we're talking about, I'm sorry, I skipped a few points. Let me go back. You identify the size and the qualifications of the support staff, the size and the qualifications. So you're saying, basically, again, you're making the prospect really secure in the fact that not only do you have a great management team, but you've got all the other people who are going to be involved in the project already involved in this thing, and they're going to cover the customer's needs in every potential way possible. Everything from soup to nuts, okay? So that there's nothing left out, that there's never going to be a time where the customer's going to feel like they can't reach the right people. Like if they've ever got questions or needs or concerns, that they're ever going to be left hanging, waiting for an answer, waiting for a reply, or that it's going to take your team a long time to complete the project because you don't have enough people on hand. What you're doing up here in this introduction, in the staffing section of it, is you're again addressing potential concerns that a customer might have before the customer has the opportunity to, quote their concerns, okay? And this goes back to some of the things we've talked about before when we were talking about, the pre-writing phase. When you think about, okay, what are the needs of my audience? What questions might they have? What might be their perspective? and making sure that as you develop your presentation, whether it's a PowerPoint in a oral presentation, or it's a written report, or it's a letter, or whatever, and in this case, it's this proposal, that you're already taking into account all of those thoughts and you're addressing them up front. Then you've got a budget, okay? And in this budget, you're presenting a careful list of project costs. When I say careful list, what I mean is your company is in the business of, let's say, building custom pools, right? Or custom homes, like I've said. So you're very, very, very good at it. So you're going to provide a list of every single thing that's going to go into this project and the attendant cost that goes along with it, so that nothing is left out, so that the customer knows from the very beginning what the project is going to cost, so that there's no surprises at the end of the project. So it's highly detailed, okay? Then also you need to remember that this budget represents a contract. Your company, the selling company, went to the customer and said, we will do this scope of work for this price. So if the family or the other business accepts and decides to go forward with your proposal, you now have an agreement that both parties have agreed to, have agreed on, okay? So it's a contract. So it's not just a document. This is something that if the relationship midway through the project begins to fall apart, and one side of the, of the customer company relationship decides, I'm taking you to court, they're going to present this document to the jury and say, look, we were given this. This is what they promised. You can see all the details in it, but they didn't perform. And if a company does something like that, not performing to the proposal, they're in hot water. This is a contract, okay? So then finally, you've got a conclusion and an authorization. The selling side requests that the buying side approves this proposal, which always means that there's going to be a sheet of paper where both parties, the seller and the buyer, sign their names. Might even be notarized, and it'll be dated. That makes it a contract, okay? And then there's also establishing a deadline for acceptance of the proposal. Meaning, look, we're giving you this quote. We know it's a lot of money, but this quote is not going to be open-ended forever. Like, don't think that you can sit on it for a year and then come back to me a year from now and expect for me to honor this contract. And the reason that that's true is because when the company who made the budget and made the quote put their numbers together, they were basing it on current costs. But the world could change dramatically between today and a year from today. So if the customer came back in 12 months and says, well, you promised me that you would do it for this price, if the selling side was sophisticated and smart and had taken this class, then the seller's going to say, aha, but you're ignoring the part where we said that you had to accept this within 30 days of us presenting it to you. So there's a deadline in which this thing has to be agreed to in order for it to still be valid. So that's the difference between this formal proposal, which might just be a letter, and this informal, and this formal proposal, which, as you can see now, has a whole lot more meat to it. Any questions about that at all, you guys, before I go on?
So proposal just like a agreement, just contract.
A proposal is a contract. It's not like a contract, it is a contract.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Great question, Zoe. Okay. So let's look a little bit deeper, right? This introduction that we talked about, just to kind of recap what we were saying, you're explaining why the proposal's being written. What was the background? How did my company and you guys come together to be talking about this in the first place? And then you include the writer's qualifications. Like I'm a professional engineer, and I've got a degree in architecture, and I've been building homes for 30 years, and blah blah blah. Those are my qualifications. And then you strive for this persuasive. In marketing, we call it a hook. And I mentioned those earlier. The great results, the great value, the lower costs, the quickness to completion. You might have a remarkable resource like a process or a machine or some other approach. Okay. We talked about the background, problem, and purpose. You identify the problem, meaning we're building this house. And then there's two other things that I didn't quite get to. One is there's an unsolicited proposal. Let's say that your company would like to be doing business with another company. They didn't ask you for a quote. There was no RFP, request for proposal, but you took it on yourself because you think that you could really help this other company in some way, and you think you can make money doing it, to reach out to them. So like in my business in marketing and advertising, I would contact a client and I would say, I'd like to chat with you about your marketing, and are you currently satisfied with, the way that your company is growing, and how has, COVID impacted your business? And would you like to get together to talk about ways that my firm can help your company start moving forward again? Now that, we're hopefully mostly past the pandemic. So it was not something, the customer didn't reach out to me. I reach out to them. So I'm going to go into their office with a series of ideas ready to talk to them about. And for each of those ideas, I'm going to have worked through what would it cost? Because obviously, if I'm talking to a customer about doing something for them, the most natural question in the world is going to be, well, what's it going to cost me? So I have to be able to answer that. So I'll have numbers ready to talk about. So it's very much the same general approach, except that in this case, in an unsolicited proposal, there was no original request coming from the customer. Now, for a solicited proposal, so to solicit somebody means to ask somebody for something, okay? So for a solicited proposal, you want to go back and use the language that came from the customer's original request so that you can confirm with the customer that you really understand what they've asked you to do. Then you present the proposal and you talk about how your execution is going to work. How are you going to do it? What methods are you going to use, etc. And you give them a schedule for beginning, middle, and end of the entire project, as well as obviously the budget for it. And we've talked about staffing. We've talked about budget. So that's generally the overall view on this formal proposal. So let's look at the steps that are involved in writing and editing a formal business report, now that we understand what this report is, okay? Formal reports and formal proposals are similar. Remember, we talked about formal reports a week or two ago. They're similar in fact that, they're equivalent in length. They're similar in the way that they're structured and organized. And they're similar in the sense that they both have a very professional tone. Remember, we're talking about formal proposals. The tone for an informal proposal is going to be much more conversational because it's only coming across as a letter. It might even be, in some cases, an email. Okay. Now, here's the steps. You determine the purpose and the scope. What are we all about doing here? And what are all the steps that are involved in us addressing the customer's request? That's the scope. How much is going to be done? That means the scope. And it's important, this piece about scope, because in any given project, you could always do more. So when you define the scope, you're saying, I am going to do, steps A, B, C, D, and E. But if you would like me to do F and G, that's not been included in the budget for that. And I'll have to come back and add that or add those things. So for instance, in my line of work, I might start with a client that says, hey, I would like you, Joe, to write my company a marketing plan. So I'll do that, and I'll say, and I'll show them the products I think they should be selling, and who they should be selling them to, and what prices I think they should be setting for those products, and how I would promote those products, etc. That would be the marketing plan. But what's left out is the cost to actually do those things. When I give him the quote for the marketing plan, I'm only quoting my cost, I'm only quoting my price for me to sit down, think about the project, and write up a report that said, if I was to do this, these are the things that I think you should do. But I'm not charging him in that quote to actually go out and do those things. I might say, I think it would be really important for you to do social media marketing. Well, I might want to charge that customer $1,500 a month to do his social media marketing. But that $1,500 a month was not included in my $10,000 for him to write the marketing plan. So what's in scope and what's out of scope? Are you guys clear on that?
Yes.
Okay. So then you want to, just like in any project, you want to anticipate the needs of the audience. Remember when we talked about, talking about staffing needs and timing and budget and schedule and processes and, qualifications of the team. Those are all included in there because in my mind, I'm thinking that this is going to be super important and they're going to want to know these things. I've done enough of them where I've sat through these meetings and these are always the questions that come up. I'm going to go ahead and put it in the document from the very beginning so I don't get hit with a bunch of questions afterwards. The other thing that it does is, besides avoiding questions, it can help you get to yes from the customer a lot faster than if you have to go back and say, gee, I didn't consider those things. Let me go back and work through it and come back to you. When you've got somebody who's hot and excited and eager to begin a project, you don't want to put any reasons for them to stall. You ever heard the saying, you want to strike when the iron's hot? That's what we're talking about there, okay? So you decide on a work plan and the appropriate research methods, meaning, okay, I'm going to structure my proposal in a certain way. Now there's going to be a lot of information that I need to pull together in order to be ready to provide that quote or to provide that schedule, et cetera. So I'm going to have to go research those things. So the question is, well, how am I going to go about getting the data that I need? Then you're going to conduct the research using, and we've used these terms before, primary and secondary sources. So that's what we're doing here is when I do primary research, it means that I'm conducting a field of questioning that's not been collected by other people ever before. Otherwise, I can go to things that were published for other reasons and lift that information from other sources and get it a lot more quickly and a lot less expensively. But in either case, I have to go do my research. Then I'm going to organize all my information. I'm going to think it through and see what the implications are and, you know, the analysis that has to happen. I'm going to draw conclusions. And I might even have to include graphics so that the customer really is clear on what they're agreeing to. In fact, most of the time, if I don't have graphics as part of my pitch, the customer is going to be confused. I have to help them really see what it is I want to sell them. So if I'm designing, if I'm a landscape artist, or if I'm, you know, digging and building a custom pool for somebody in their backyard, I'm going to have really highly polished conceptual drawings of what the yard is going to look like once all the plants are in and I've added the walkways and the new cement, you know, and the fountain and the bushes and where they're going to go and blah, 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 blah. So that the customer understands clearly what my idea and my concept is that I'm pitching him on. So if you think about this list, 1 through 6, these are basically, with a few revisions, the same steps that we've talked about before when it came to the pre-writing phase. In the pre-writing phase, we said, okay, what are you trying to communicate to your audience? Determine the purpose and the scope. What questions might come up? Anticipate the needs. How do you think you should, make your communication? Should it be a direct or an indirect approach? Do you expect that they're going to be happy about what it is you have to say, or they may not be very friendly to the idea? I'm going to take different paths depending on what I expect my audience to need. I'll do the research, I organize. So all of this should feel very, very familiar. We're just giving it a little bit different spin, but it's basically the same thing. Okay, so what do we review when we're editing format? For business reports. Well, there's format, there's heading levels, there's the accuracy that's involved, there's consistency, graphics, and mechanics. Format is going to be, there's going to be multiple levels to this report. We've talked about developing outlines before, and we've talked about, okay, you have a title that's going to probably have the largest font size. Then you're going to have headings and subheadings. You're going to have, subheadings, etc. And how are you going to lay that out in your report? You're going to have to make sure that you're consistently following that plan throughout the entire document so people don't get confused. When we talk about accuracy, we're talking about accuracy in your timing, like, in your schedule. We're also talking about, really importantly, the accuracy in the budget. Because if you put a contract out that you're going to do a project for a certain price, and it turns out that you underbid the project, so your numbers were too small and you screwed up, your problem, not the customer's. And if you failed to deliver, you're going to be in what they call in breach of contract, which means that you have broken the contract and they can sue you in court and win. So it's super important that you're accurate in your numbers, or you're probably going to lose money on the project. And no one runs a business to lose money. Now, when we talk about mechanics, we're talking about spelling, grammar, punctuation, formatting, all of that's, margin width, all of that stuff is very important there. Graphics, we've spoken to that a minute ago. And the idea about consistency is, once you start some sort of a scheme, a layout idea, for major headings are going to be a certain font size and a certain font type. Maybe they're going to be all bold. Then you have to take that and execute it throughout the document. Just as an example. Then you do your research. And in this case, you're using, again, like I mentioned, primary and secondary sources. So you also, as you're pulling, especially, well, on both cases, actually, when you start using sources, because this is all about your business and your profitability, but also your credibility and your reputation, whatever sources that you use have got to be good sources, because it's not going to fly with the customer to come back and say, sorry, you know, the numbers that I used, well, they were wrong, so I was wrong, so no harm, no foul, right? No one's going to go along with that. If you blew it, they're just going to say, hey, you know, sorry, Charlie, but you blew it. We trusted you that these numbers were valid, so you're going to need to execute. A lot of companies have been impacted by this from time to time. I have a cousin of mine who owns a really successful civil engineering company, and they build sewer treatment stations and water treatment plants for cities. So the projects that he does are in the millions and millions of dollars for every project. So can you imagine how much it would cost him if he got his numbers wrong? That could absolutely blow a business out of the water. And when your customers are cities or counties, what do you think a city or a county is going to say to an excuse like, hey, you know, the numbers I had were wrong? Oh, no problem. No way. He's done projects for, have you guys been to Anaheim Stadium? See Angels play?
Yes.
So you know all of the concrete work that's out there in front of the stadium? You come off the asphalt and there's all the white concrete all the way around the stadium, all the fencing and everything. His company did all that work. So if you blow a project like that, that could finish your company, right? So again, very important to be accurate and to assess the credibility or the trustability of the resources that you're using to pull data from. Okay, so when we look at secondary sources, these are a few of what we call online databases. And our library at Fullerton College has most of these. So there's ABI Inform, Factiva, which, do you guys know what Dow Jones is? Factiva and Dow Jones are going to give you financial performance data for industries and companies within industries. JSTOR is a provider of research papers of all sorts. EBSCO is they are like a huge library that have all kinds of articles available on all kinds of subjects. And then LexisNexis is another sort of database that can give you access to just tremendous amount of information. So anytime that you feel like you need to do research for a particular class that you might have in the future, these are all really nice and available to you, okay? Definitely suggest that you make good use of those things. So these are online, you know, web-based. There's also printed resources, and this is old school. This is where, when I was in college and your age, this is where everything was at for us. The most sophisticated we had was something called microfilm or microfiche. Have you ever heard of microfilm? Think about a roll of camera film, only it's already been developed, but it's still in that roll fashion. So it's a long strip that it's so long it curls up and it's kept in a little round canister. And then you take that and you put it into a little machine that blows it up big so you can actually read it. Because you might have, you know, all of the issues of a particular newspaper that go back for 60, 70, 80 years, all on one piece of film. So that was what we had. So books or microfilm or microfiche. So that's old school, but again, there's, you know, and in some ways, these things are still available, especially if you're looking at magazines to pull information from or newspapers. Now, if you're going to be doing Google search, these are some pretty useful tricks to use. If you're looking to pull information up using exact words, like what you really want are interview tips. You really want that to come up within the documents that you're reading, that you're searching for. You want those words in it. Then you have to put it in quotation marks, okay? If what you're looking for is a definition of something and not just like if I just put the word networking in, I might get 100 or millions of blogs and articles and references having to do with computer networking or social networking or human networking and et cetera, business networking. But if all I want is a definition, then I have to include the word define in the search field. If what I'm looking for is, let's say that I'm thinking, okay, I'd like to look at New York Times for a particular subject, but I'd also like to look at maybe some of the New York Times nearest competitors. So if I say related : NewYorkTimes.com, it'll give me a list of sites that are like the New York Times website. Now, what I want is results with one or several choices or an or, then I could say, I'd like to know the Super Bowl winner for 2015 or 2016. So that if my search doesn't list anything for 15, but there's available information for 16, that'll come up. So you could actually string several ors together. I'd like to know about networking or business relationships or business associations. So using or to string those together. Or I could say I'm interested in an asterisk, using this asterisk like a wild card. You guys all know what a wild card is, I think, don't you? Like if you're playing cards?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a wild card to find some unknown word. So let's say, quote, a something saved is a something earned. Well, if I did that, this happens to be a quote from Benjamin Franklin, and it actually goes, a penny saved is a penny earned. I may not remember the exact quote, but I'd like to use the quote, and I can remember most of it. So if I use this asterisk, it's a way of getting that information really quickly. Okay. And then a Boolean search lets me, it's like using the word or. And if I don't want to use or, I could use and. So I'd like to know the Super Bowl winners for 2015 and 2016. Or I'd like to have Super Bowl winners for 2015, but not 2016. So it's a way to limit your search. A few other things about using secondary sources is how old is the information? Let's say that, my company, we're trying to put a budget together for a particular project. I'm not sure what certain things might cost, but I know I'm going to need those certain things. If I don't pay attention to the dates that things were published on the web, I might be pulling costs from 10 years ago. Are those going to be valid and useful? Of course not. So thinking about how old is the information, or if I'm looking at a website that's got information on it that I'm going to use for my project, well, how old was the information that the people who wrote the site? When was the last time that they updated their site? If I go to a site and this is a company that doesn't keep it very fresh all the time like you should, then I might be pulling information that's really old again. So I don't want anything that could possibly get me in trouble on this proposal. So it's got to be very, very current. Another thing is, who collected the information? Are they knowledgeable? Do they have what they call authority? Or is this some Yahoo that just threw something out there? Like, if you look at Wikipedia, the problem with Wikipedia is that anybody can make an entry on there. You don't really know who made the entry on there. Could be some guy that doesn't know anything about the topic, but it was entered into the wiki. That's really not very useful information if it comes from somebody that's not very educated in a topic. Just because something is on the website, just because something is on the internet, does not make it true. We all know that, obviously, right? So who published or who sponsored the page? What makes the author an authority? Or another question is there any contact information available? Why would I want the contact information, you guys? What could I do with that?
To corroborate information?
Yes, absolutely, Elizabeth. I might have questions, like I might be looking at some of this information. Some of it looks really, really good, but then some of it I'm really kind of skeptical about. Like, I don't know about this. Some of that I thought was really good, but this? The first thought is, well, I'd like to talk to the person who wrote this information and see how they collected their data or what their experience is to be writing this information. And obviously, if you have a conversation like that, you want to do it in a very savvy way, in a very friendly way that doesn't make the people think that you doubt what they said. You're curious. You're not going to be insulting though, you know the difference. Okay, now content. Different types of websites have different goals in mind. Do you guys all know what the onion is?
Opinion?
Let me show you the onion for a second, and I think you'll get immediately what I'm talking about. I'll get out of this for a second, because I think this is going to help me make my point really well. Okay, so let's just pull any of this. Looks like a newspaper, right? Exxon staff wins company-wide pizza party after greenhouse gas levels hit new high. Now, does this sound like a serious article to you, or does it sound like it's sarcastic?
Sarcastic.
Of course, it's sarcastic. So that's exactly what the onion does. But if I'm not paying attention to who the source is, and I just start reading this, following the release of a World Meteorological Organization report that found greenhouse gases concentrations reached a new high in 2020, sources confirmed the staff of ExxonMobil was rewarded Tuesday with a company-wide pizza party. We just wanted to do something nice to show the team our appreciation for all their hard work. So obviously, what the writer is really saying is these oil companies have really got us in a terrible fix. But they're saying it in a very cynical, snide, sarcastic way. Because obviously no one's going to have a pizza party because greenhouse gases are at an all-new high. That's not a good accomplishment, right? Okay, so going back to the slide, let me go back to Zoom a minute and share my screen again. Maybe I don't need to do that. Can you see the slide?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So the purpose of the site, is it to entertain, inform, persuade, sell? You might find information on there that was never intended to be taken seriously. Or and we all know about that from a political perspective after the last few years, right? I mean, who's telling the truth? Is it CNN or is it Fox or is it nobody? Who is the intended audience? How does the content compare with other content that you found elsewhere? Always do that, by the way. if you're looking at information that you think seems too good to be true or extreme or something, look for a few other sources and see if they don't all match. And if they don't, then you need to throw away that first quote. Look for the things that have the most commonality. Because that's one way of getting at more accurate, more true content. Okay. Do the facts seem reliable? Do you find errors in spelling or grammar? If you're finding errors in spelling and grammar on a website, what should that tell you about people who published it?
Not professional or
Yeah.
not okay.
Exactly, Zoe. And if they're not all that professional, how confident are you going to be in using their information?
Not much.
No, not much. Can you detect a bias? Like, do you think the people who wrote this information had a particular slant in the way that they were seeing and thinking about things? Like, I can't watch Fox News. I refuse to watch Fox News. I think, they're a pack of scoundrels. Okay. So because I know that they're incredibly biased. Anyway, okay. Now we talk about, so that was all secondary research. Now we're talking about primary research. And number of ways to go about getting that. Asking people what they think is a really legitimate way to collect information. And when we do that in an organized way, we call it taking surveys. So you can go online and use SurveyMonkey and collect surveys really easily, or another site I've never used, but it's called Zoomerang. I am very familiar with SurveyMonkey. The great thing about SurveyMonkey is the information comes to you and it's already had all the analysis, all the statistics are already completed. And it's you can use their templates to put your questions together. And if you need help and you've got a subscription, then they've got a team of people who can help you, frame your questions the right way. There's a lot to making a survey. And we don't have time to get into it. Interviews. An interview is like a survey, but you've got the person in front of you, or maybe on the phone, or maybe there's a group of people, not just one person that you're sitting down with. At any rate, you're able to dig and probe and get more information about the questions that you're asking because it's a conversation. With a survey, all you get are the specific answers to the specific questions that you asked. If you didn't think to ask the questions in a different way or add more detail to your questions or ask more questions, you're not going to get that information. Whereas with interviews, it's part of the process. And then finally, there's a thing called observation and experimentation. And let me move this. I don't know if you can see that or not, but observation and experimentation. So in observation and experimentation, what you're doing is you're watching people perform behaviors in a natural setting. You're not interfering with them. You're not interacting with them. All you're doing is you're standing in some place where they don't know you're there and you're just watching what they do. So let's say that you wanted to understand how people shop for yogurt, for instance, at the grocery store. You want to know, you're thinking about maybe changing what you put on your company's yogurt packaging. So you stand someplace near the refrigerated dairy section, which is where you get yogurt. And you notice that people who shop for yogurt pick the cups up, look at the ingredients really carefully. They spend a good few minutes looking at things before they put it in their cart. This tells you that people are thinking pretty carefully about what they're eating, at least in that category. But if you looked at those same people in other parts of the store, like when they get to the bread aisle, they just grab the first loaf of bread they see and they throw it in their basket. So you know that their shopping behavior with bread is really different compared to how much time and effort they put into buying yogurt. So as a marketer, you can learn an awful lot about how important certain things in packaging are to shoppers who eat a lot of yogurt. Or you could do experiments. An experiment could be like, you decide that you want to test a new ad campaign. You want to see, if this ad, this print ad that you're going to put in a few magazines is going to be an ad that people remember. So you set up an experiment where you ask your people who represent your shoppers to come into a research facility and you have them wait in a waiting room and you give them some magazines to look at. And you're making them wait for a while. And they don't know really why they're waiting, but they're going through the magazines. Actually, this is why you invited them in. Because when you get them sitting down across the table from you, you're going to start asking questions like, do you remember any ads that you saw in the magazine? What ads do you remember? Do you remember seeing any ads for pickup trucks? Which pickup trucks do you remember seeing? Do you remember seeing a pickup truck ad by Ford? What did you think about that Ford ad? So you're testing a lot of different things. Did people look at the ad? Did they remember the ad? Did they remember the ad on an unaided basis? Meaning you didn't prompt them about potential truck ads that were in the magazine. You just said, what ads did you see? It's a way to understand how memorable is that campaign before you spend a whole lot of money by putting it into distribution in magazines all over the country. So that's an experiment. Okay.
But isn't this somewhat similar to survey in a way?
To what?
Survey is
Well,
is
it
the
could
experiment
be like a survey. It is, but the survey, they may not. The difference is that the survey probably doesn't have the opportunity to sit down with magazines and start, leafing through them and turning the pages and actually, putting them in that same usage experience. Okay. And if I've got a person at a table with me, then I can begin to ask more questions based on things that they're telling me. The survey is really limited. It's only going to have the questions that I thought about asking before I publish the survey and put it out there. But I'm learning, but in the interview situation, I'm learning a lot that I didn't even know was an issue before the customer started talking to me. And because I'm thinking on my feet and I'm curious, I'm asking more questions than the ones I even expected to ask, because I can learn a lot from this customer right now.
Understood.
Yeah, that was a good question, Paul. Anybody else have questions? Okay. Now let's look at the purposes and the techniques of documenting and citing sources in business reports. Now this all goes to, references, right? And citations, which are obviously pretty important things that we use usually when we're writing reports. The one that I'm having you guys do, you're not going to have to worry about that this semester because I've given you all the sources and you didn't have to do your own research. I'm more interested in what are you thinking about. But let's look at how we do citations and references. First of all, it's really important to make sure that if we're using somebody else's work, that we reference that work. Otherwise, if we don't reference somebody else's writing and we took it from somebody else, there's a word for that. What is that word, you guys? It's plagiarism. Using somebody else's material and passing it off in a way that other people think you wrote it is highly unethical. So you don't want to do that. If you're going to use somebody else's stuff, you have to have a way to let the reader know, hey, I didn't write this section, or these aren't my ideas. So giving credit is ethical and offers benefits. One is it strengthens your argument. Okay, meaning, hey, I did all the research to prepare for this proposal. And because I've done all this research, I know I'm super prepared. Two, it protects you from charges of plagiarism. And it lets the reader know if you're really curious about this particular issue, this is where you can go to get more information like that. Let me show you a different example, okay? I'll go to my Facebook page. Okay. So I have a podcast, you guys, that I've been doing for almost a year now. And before I write it, I produce it, everything. And every one of them that I do has a ton of research in it. So an episode just came out on Sunday. And this list, everything you see in blue here, these are all the sources that I used to prepare that episode. Really important for me to do that because this podcast is available on all of the podcast carriers. You can get it on Amazon, you can get it on iTunes, you can get it on Alexa or Google. I mean, everywhere. Everybody's got it. So the people who wrote some of the information that I'm using might recognize it. And I don't ever want to be accused of having plagiarized somebody's work. So I make it known at the end of every episode, hey, if you're curious about any of the stuff that I've talked about, go to my American Song Podcast Facebook page, and you can check out any of the sources that I used and learn even more about it. So everyone who publishes anything does this. You have to give credit whenever you use these things. Another person's ideas or opinions or examples or theory. So like in that podcast, there was a section that I was talking about number of different chord structures that were used in early rock songs that were written between 1955 and 1959. And it turned out that there happened to be a study on that done by some guy who's a professor at a university in Virginia. So I found his research and I thought it was interesting and useful with what I was talking about. And so I used it, but I didn't want people to think it was mine. So in the podcast, I said, this is the guy, there's a guy named, this is his name. He teaches at this university and he did this study and I'm just sharing it with you. Plus, if people were really curious, they could always come back here, find it, and see the actual study itself, okay? If you're gonna share facts, statistics, charts, drawings, anything that's not common knowledge would be who is the first president of the United States? Well, everybody knows that, right? But if it's information that not everybody knows, and you're referencing it, you need to tell people where you got it from. Or another one would be, if you're quoting specifically exactly what somebody said, then you need to quote who said it. If you're paraphrasing, meaning you're not using their exact words, but you're getting the idea of the message across, you still have to give the original person that said the actual thing credit, okay? If you're using anything that came off the web, you have to reference that too. So basically, whenever you take any information from anywhere, unless it's something that you and your genius mind yourself came up with, you got to back it up with where did you get this? So it'll be important in your education, and it's going to be doubly important when you're representing a company. Now, paraphrasing. Do you guys know what it means to paraphrase? Can anybody define that term for me?
When you put something into your own words.
Yes, that's exactly right. Thanks, Zane. So whenever you, okay, so paraphrasing, how do we do it, right? We read the original material closely so that we really understand what the original author was trying to say. And then you find a way to say that same idea a different way, your way. You know, avoid repeating the structure of the original and replacing words with, what is a synonym?
Similar.
Yes, similar words. So if if somebody said, you know, that project was very difficult, and I'm thinking I'm, you know, paraphrasing, and I said that project was very hard, I'm not really paraphrasing. So you need to, and again, it's about reading the original material to get the entire context of what that person said, get the whole message into your head, and then write that message in a different way. That's really what paraphrasing is. And then once you've done steps 1, 2, and 3, 4 is go back to the original and make sure that what you've just written is a fair representation of the original thought. At the same time, doesn't borrow any of the language from the original author. Clear? Questions about that? Okay, I'm going to say that you guys understand. Yes? No?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great. All right. So then, after all this talk about paraphrasing, is it okay to quote? Sure it is. But you don't want to overuse quotations. It's great to use quotes, but only for 3 reasons, okay? One of them is to provide background data and establish the severity of a problem as seen by experts. Remember now, we're talking about proposals, right? And there's this issue about a problem that you're trying to address. So, you know, if an expert said something in a report that they wrote, and you now are using that information and you think that what the original document said was so important, you can use the exact quote. I'll give you an example. In 1997, my first wife and I bought a home in Chino Hills in a place called Carbon Canyon. Real lovely little spot. With one exception, was it lovely. The problem with it is that it was riddled with termites and dry rot everywhere. But there had been, the guy that did the housing inspection for us was probably paid off by the seller of the home because he wrote the building an amazingly immaculate, perfect review. This house couldn't be in better condition, blah, 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 blah. So come to find out, we've got major problems. We've got a termite company comes out and writes a report. And what it basically says is, this place is ready to fall down. We had problems. Well, I needed to then have a lot of repairs done. So what he said in his report that I paid him to write, which was an accurate assessment, could have been very, very important to the company who was writing me the quote to do the work to fix everything. Okay. So that's one reason. 2 is if I want to take somebody's quote, use his identical phrasing because of the clarity, meaning, you know, how perfectly specific it was written, how precise it was. And that's another opportunity. The third one is, if I am going to write a critique about something, let's say that somebody said something and I'm going to address it. And mine's going to be critical of that statement. Maybe what I need to do is start by getting the reader to understand what was the original statement that I'm so upset about. Okay. So there's been a lot of that actually in the news in the last few days. Have you guys been following at all what has come out of the hearings about the January 6th insurrection in the last few days? No? I'm going to take that this is a no.
No.
It turns out that the majority of the Republicans in Congress had meetings pre the insurrection, and they were all involved in it.
Wow.
Wow.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. Basically, we've been in a state of a cold civil war. When your government attacks another side of the government, that's a civil war. Now, it's a civil war without bullets being traded, but this is the bullshit that's going on.
Sheesh. Wow.
What do you think of them apples, you guys? Nobody has any opinions.
It's kind of complicated, all the situation between, it's like a hot potato.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It seems to me like it's very clear cut. The American public elected a president, and the losing party decided they didn't want to go along with the peaceful exchange of power for the first time in our country's history in over 245 years. That's no hot potato.
That's insane.
Well, it's kind of like the opposite.
Oh,
Would it be like the opposite?
I don't know what you mean by that, Elizabeth.
Yeah, like, so like you said, like one side is fighting the other side when they have to be together to just fix problems and everything.
And they're not doing that.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
they're fighting each other.
Yes.
Yeah, we're in a really interesting period in American history, you guys. But we're getting way off topic, so let's we better move on. Okay. But if you guys got time this week, you should really read up on that situation, because this is your country too. Okay, copyright information. Do you guys know what a copyright is?
Yeah.
Tell me.
Copy. It's
Pretty much like a
copy somebody.
like your registration that you're a legitimate thing and that you own all the
Yes.
rights.
Yes. Yes. So it's about intellectual property. So if you create anything, you're going to go out and get the legal protection so that other people can't benefit from what you created. And the copyright is the thing that protects you. Okay. And usually copyrights last for a period of years. Same thing with trademarks, by the way. Copyrights are mostly for published material. Music, books, songs, poems, and any literature, you know, you name it. When it comes to physical objects and machines and things like that, we talk about trademarks. Okay. So this fair use rule has to do with the validity of a trademark or a copyright. You want to look at the purpose and character of the copyright itself, meaning You know, was it copyrighted for profit or not? Here's why this is important. Because if you start going to published materials and using them as sources, but not providing citations or references, you are technically in violation of these copyrights. You don't have the right to use other people's stuff without giving them credit. So what we're talking about here is, you know, what's the nature of the copyright? How much of that material did you actually use? Was it a sentence, or was it a page, or was it an entire chapter? And what effect did your use of that copyrighted material have on the business of the company that owned the copyright? So I'll give you an example from music, since that's one thing I know a lot about from a long time ago. Do you guys know who this guitar player for the Beatles named George Harrison? Have you ever heard his name before? You ever heard of the Beatles before?
I heard the Beatles, but
Okay.
Yeah,
So
heard of
this
the
guy named
Beatles,
George
but not-
Harrison, right? He wrote a song in the 70s after that band had broken up that sounded a lot like a song from another band from the 60s. And he was sued and he lost in court. Now, he didn't do it intentionally, but it was close enough that he lost the case. And because he was in violation of the other composer's copyright laws. And so he had to pay a lot of money in damages for having done that. So that's an example of that situation. So how do we avoid infringing, meaning breaking somebody else's copyright, using it when we don't have the right to use it? Well, the way that you avoid it is to assume that everything you see on the web, whether it's pictures or text, is copyrighted. And realize that anything that's on the net is, quote, not in the public domain. Public domain means that that the material that is in question has been published for so long, like more than 100 years, that the copyright laws have worn out and it's no longer protected. They don't last forever, okay? So it's when that happens, it becomes public domain. So what they're saying is, realize that anything that's on the net is not public domain. If you're going to use something, ask for permission. So that's why we go back to, can you identify who wrote something? Then you're going to want to go back to the writer, the author. Let's say there was an article written that you found on a newspaper's website. They always provide a byline, meaning who is the author for the article. You would go back to that newspaper and say, hey, there's a quote, or there's something that we would like to use. Can we get your permission to do it? And usually they'll say yes, and it's going to cost you X, Y, Z. So that means that if you go to the internet and you go looking at Google Images, for instance, you need to assume that every picture you see on the internet is protected with the copyright. So for you to copy, paste, and use that on reports and other things, technically is breaking the law. You're infringing on somebody's copyrights. So if you do that as a business, you're really in deep doo-doo, because now as a student, people are going to look the other way because you're just a student. But if this is a business that's gone about the process of lifting, let's say, character art, let's say it's Warner Brothers character art, and you decide that you want to create a flyer that includes these characters in the artwork, you can't do that unless you go back to Warner Brothers and say, hey, I'd like to. And they're going to say, okay, well, we can do that, but there's a process called licensing. and it's going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars to use our characters. Are you sure you still want to use them? And then they're going to give you all of the rules and explanations about how you can use them. Okay. I'll skip these two, but there's two things. Modern language association. This is how we structure and format documents. And the American Psychological Association, again, how we format and structure documents. These are the two common ways that people in the business world reference when they're going to start putting, when they're going to start publishing stuff. It's going to have to conform to either one of these two things. And I think that's all you need to know about that. If you've got a lot of information in a report, and you're talking about a lot of numbers, you could do it in a few ways. You could write a paragraph and include all the numbers in your paragraph, but you're going to confuse everybody. But a way better way is to come up with a device that quickly explains the information that you otherwise would have had to write about. For instance, let me show you some examples, right? If I have a bar chart here, and I don't, you can label it anything you want. Let's say that red is sales, annual sales for 2018. And green is annual sales for 2019. And blue is annual sales for 2020. Well, I could write these down and bury it in a paragraph. But if I just show you this information, this chart here, you get all of the understanding that it would have taken you more time and confusion to read through just by looking at that picture. Because a picture says 1,000 words. Or I could also create a table where there's a heading in these blue spaces here over each column. Let's say that we're writing a section about modes of transportation. And I'm talking about ground transportation, water transportation, and air transportation. Ground, water, and air. Well, I could write a paragraph and have all these terms separated by commas, but it's going to be a nightmare to read through that and very difficult to understand. But if I put it in a table and I say, okay, methods of ground transportation, motorcycles, cars, trucks, buses, that's easy. I see that right there. And then if I look at the water transportation, okay, I've got boats, I've got submarines, I've got sailboats, I've got steamships, whatever, aircraft carriers, right? Whatever. Same thing with air, right? Helicopters, private jets, airplanes as compared to jets, hot air balloons. So again, represents what you could have put into a paragraph, but it presents it to your audience in a much, much easier way for them to get the information and remember it. So graphics clarify data, creates visual interest, simplifies our understanding of the data, and it makes it easier to understand. So now that I showed you these and I explained them, and you read these, I think it's a pretty simple thing to grasp, right? Easy to remember. Now, if what I want to show is a time series of information, where this line chart show, let's say that going up and down, is sales figures, sales dollars, and going left to right is time. This tells a story that says, for a certain period of time, our sales were always going up and up and up. And then for a little while, we started losing sales again, but then we had a turnaround in the business and the sales have been going up ever since. That's the story that I get when I look at that graph. And it tells it really quickly. I can look at that, and as soon as I look at it, I understand it. I know what it means. Now, if what I'm using is a pie chart, I'm using this so that people understand how big certain things are in comparison to other things when all three of those elements compose the whole. So let's go back to my transportation example for a second, right? We said ground, water, and air transportation. Let's say that the yellow represents ground transportation. And I have a legend here on the side that says yellow is ground, green is air, red is water. I can really quickly look at that and say, you know what? Ground looks like it's almost half of all transportation. That tells my story really quickly. And all I had to do is look at the picture to understand that. We also want to, if we're going to use photos or maps and other things, the first thing we want to do is say, okay, what is it that I'm trying to communicate in this section of my report? And then think to yourself, well, is this an idea that's difficult that I can make simpler by adding a picture? If adding the picture makes your point easier to grasp for the reader, then do it. If it's a simple point that you don't need to illustrate because it's just so, duh, then don't worry about it. So these are the basic sections. I think we're getting close to where I think we can probably sign off for the night. I don't want to keep you forever. This part I want you guys to read on your own. This is really simple stuff, right? What is the cover and title page? What's the letter or memo of transmittal? I talked about this at the beginning of the night. You know what a table of contents is. I discussed lists of illustrations at the beginning. The executive summary, let's spend a minute here. An executive summary is written for the big boss in the company, like the CEO or the president or the VP, or maybe somebody like the chairman of the board for a really large corporation. Those guys don't want to know, don't care to know all of the details. Mostly what they want to know is things are going okay on this project. They have people that they pay that are beneath them in the organization to worry and sweat the small details. So this executive summary handles everything at a real top line level. Okay. You're going to start this single page in your report, one page only, with a statement about the purpose. The purpose of this report is to provide an update on the status of our ... project. You're going to include strategic words and sentences. Strategic words and sentences meaning, our, the time, our budget, we are on budget, or we are close to budget, or we are behind budget, but we estimate we're going to make it up. Schedule, we are on time, we're ahead of schedule, we're behind schedule. The purpose for this project is to give our company an advantage in this particular market segment, or whatever is important to the document is what we mean by strategic words and sentences. You create an outline with the headings for the purpose, the conclusions, and the recommendations. This is going to be your heading and your subheads that are all going to be included on that one page. And then you're going to add the appropriate content, the information that you need to write in the proper sections underneath those headings or subheads. And we know what an introduction is. I think it's easy for you guys to read about. We've looked at all the components. An appendix. When you have a lot of charts and tables and graphics and things, sometimes it's easier, less interruptive to the report and the presentation of the information if you take all of that extra stuff and put it at the back of the report. So the appendix is a special place in the report where you're going to put copies of a survey form, if that was an important thing that you did in the project, or copies of other reports, if you want people to reference those, or tables or graphics, or maybe examples of letters, anything that's important to people really understanding in depth the information that's in your report, you would include that in the appendix, okay? You don't interrupt your report to slice it in, throughout the report. It goes at the back, all of that. When you use your citations or the references, stuff we've been spending so much time on, you can actually create, in the body of your document and all those pages leading up to the end of it, little footnote numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 throughout. Then create a page or two or as many as you need at the back of the report where you list all your citations. So if you had a one someplace early in your report that referenced a particular citation, then at the back, when you created your report, whatever the actual reference is that corresponds with your one, you're going to provide that, okay? And so forth until you've included all of your citations. Just like every other writing project that we've talked about, always give yourself enough time for lots of reasons. Stuff is going to come up midway through a project or at the end of the project that you didn't anticipate early on. So if you don't start early, there's a really good solid chance that you're not going to have enough time to finish it on the deadline. And when you don't hit deadlines at work, it affects your credibility. It makes you look unprofessional because you're paid to be thinking about plan B, like the what if, something interrupts my workflow? Well, you should have thought of that and gotten started earlier. Finish collecting your data and doing your analysis with that data before you begin to write. So let me just flash backwards to how we started this evening and me walking you through assignment 3. The first, and in fact, assignments 1 and 2 also. In each of those cases, I've asked you to do the research first and to take the notes so that you're paying attention to what you're reading, okay? And then on top of that, afterwards, I'm asking you to write something, just like I did tonight. You do those first things with those 2 websites, learn everything I'm wanting you to learn about, and then write your essay. Work from a good outline. Well, I've given you the outline in this particular assignment example, but in future, you won't have somebody giving you an outline. So you're going to be the one that's going to have to decide what's the best way to structure this information. Creating a proper writing environment. This really means someplace that's comfortable, that's quiet, where you've got everything you need to do your project, where you're not going to have a lot of interruptions. Use your computer features wisely. What does that mean? Well, you should know how to use the edit functions, for instance. And another thing that I think is really important is save your documents frequently, because there's nothing worse than losing hours of work because you didn't save something and all of a sudden, the software froze and you had to shut off your computer and you lost the last 3 hours of work. That's happened to me before and I hate it. You don't want to be in that spot. Write rapidly and revise later. Most important thing is to get all of your ideas down on paper. So just, stream of consciousness, just, write as you think, put it all out there. Don't edit yourself first, then put it away for a while. Then when you're objective about it again, pick it up and start to do the cleanup work. But if you're going to do that, it goes right back to the first bullet point about allowing sufficient time. So here's what I would advise against, like with this third assignment. Knowing that it's due on the 8th of November, starting it on the 7th, or starting it on the 8th in the morning. That would be a real bad idea, because this is going to take you some time. So instead think, okay, maybe if Joe's giving me, 2 weeks to work on this thing, if I'm conscientious about what I'm doing, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, but pretty soon, I'm going to start looking at it and start thinking about it and start working on it. And maybe build yourself a schedule about how you're going to approach that project and work to that schedule, and make sure that you've got 50% of your schedule time available to go back and do those rewrites. Like we've always said, it takes about 50% of your time in the reviewing, finalizing, proofing, all that stuff. Save difficult sections until you've gained confidence. So there were some sections in that assignment that we talked about tonight that you think are more difficult than others. Do the other stuff first. Like that's why I'm having you start with just reviewing, take the test and start reviewing the sections. That's pretty simple, and you're moving forward getting it done. Use verb tenses consistently. If you're writing in the present tense, stay in the present tense. If you're writing in the past tense, stay in the past tense. Make sure that you've got parallel construction. Usually for business, you want to avoid talking about I and we. It should be in the third person. For your assignment, it's obviously about you, so you don't need to worry about that. Write that first draft. I said this a minute ago. Give yourself some time to cool off and get objective about it, and then go back to it, which means also you need to start early. Revise for clarity, meaning if other people read what you wrote, are they going to understand what it is that you intend to say? Coherence, right? That means how well does the thing hang together? Is it structured properly? Is it logical? And conciseness, meaning, are you saying things with 30 words that you could just as easily say with 5? And then proofread your final copy 3 times. Because the first time you're going to proofread it, you'll find some errors in it. It should be a game for you. The more, and you're looking for points, and the most points wins. So hope to find lots and lots of errors. Circle those errors or highlight them or something, make note of them. Then go back and clean it up, put it away for a while, go back to it again, read through it again. This time, the second time around, you're going to be reading for tone of voice. You're going to be reading for, did I address the, audience's questions? Are there other things that still need to be addressed? So the first time around, it's getting all the mechanical problems. The second time, it's all of these other subtle issues. And then the third time, it's to make sure that what you've got is as perfect as you can make it. And that's it, you guys. Questions on anything we've talked about?
No, sir.
All right. So here's what's coming up. Next week, you're going to have, we'll have our lecture on the next chapter, but also you'll have the next exam for chapters 6 through 10, just like we had for the first exam, 1 through 5. It'll be an online test found in the quiz section of Canvas, like we did before. You'll have a certain amount of time to take it in, but you can take it at any time during next week. And I'll have it available for you by Monday at 8 a.m.
Sounds good.
All right. You guys have a great rest of your week. Thanks for making time for this tonight. Feel free to reach out at any point about anything, okay?
Professor, I have a question about
Sure.
The grades, because on my grades, they show that we had to do the videos
Yeah, I don't know how that was there. That's a mistake or an error on my part.
Yeah.
That should not have been a thing for you.
Because they're graded, and obviously I have no points.
Well, that's
And-
because it's not an assignment really, Elizabeth. I don't know how that was there. I didn't know that.
Oh, okay. So, and for chapter 7, the quiz was closed when I tried to
I'll open it up for you again.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else
And-
need me to open anything right now?
Yeah, I need chapter 7 as well, because I also had the same issue as Elizabeth.
I'll take care of you guys, no problem.
Thank you.
You bet. In fact, I'll just open it up for the class in case there's anybody else in that situation too.
Okay, thank you.
Have a great evening, you guys. Thank you for spending time. Have a good night.
Thank you,
too.
Professor.
Bye-bye.
You too.
There.
See ya.
Thank you, Professor.
You're very welcome. See you, Paul.
Have a good night, sir. Oh, so we don't have to do the video recording?
No,
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I'll
don't
just
worry
keep
about
doing it. So, okay.
yeah, don't
Okay,
sweat.
that's relief.
Yeah, okay, bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.